All right, you guys, time to react to the Seahawks 26-20 win over the Denver Broncos at home today. Mike Macdonald, of course, in his debut as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks in front of a packed house at Lumen Field, an invigorated, energetic crowd today. There was lots to take away from this one. Some good, some bad, some concerns, some things to get excited about. We'll hand out some game balls. We'll break it all down, go over the stats, give you my thoughts from what I saw and felt in the stadium, get your questions, comments, and takes coming up next. The Seahawks 1-0 under Mike Macdonald. Let's break it all down next.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
All right, you guys, bear with me on this one. Apparently, the live stream not going out over Twitter at the moment, but if you are on YouTube, you can see me there. You can comment through there. Your comments will come through and we can share them on the screen. Just trying a different way to do the live stream today so that I can get more of your interaction on the screen rather than going directly through YouTube, because YouTube doesn't let you do that, which is kind of lame. What isn't lame is the Seahawks are 1-0 under Mike Macdonald. A 26-20 victory today at Lumen Field in a game that had a lot of us wringing our hands, sweaty palms, some PTSD, some flashbacks in the first half to struggles in certain areas, one in particular, and then ultimately they end up getting the W. If you're new to the channel, new to the stream, I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that thumbs up on the video and hit that bell button if you want to get notification of future episodes. If you're listening on audio, just be sure to subscribe so that you know whenever there are new episodes. So here's how these reaction shows will work, and they will vary from time to time. When it is a home game, I will be at the game. And so it takes me a little time, obviously, to get home afterwards and compile a few notes and thoughts. But mostly when I go to the games live, I like to share my impromptu, kind of off the cuff reactions in as organic a way as I can. What I thought in the moment, what I felt and saw in the stadium. And then we'll come back on Mondays and break things down a little more completely once we get some injury updates and we hear from the coach in his coach's show. But it does give me a little bit of time to check things a little bit, look over some stats. We'll go over some of those together. And you know, a quick check of Twitter so we can get some injury updates. We do have a couple of those for you today. First of all, how did it start and how did it finish? First half was rough. First quarter was rough. First play of the game, Geno Smith sacked. Second play of the game, an interception. I haven't had a chance to see a replay of the interception. If one of you would let me know, because the ball was a duck over the middle that was picked. Was his arm hit? Or was it tipped at all? I couldn't tell, and I did not see the replay. But just to give you an idea of how rough it was, Seahawks had 8 drives in the first half, and really 7. If the 8th one was the very end of the half, really didn't go anywhere. First one, as we said, first play of the game, sack. Second play of the game, instant pressure. Geno pressured, throws the interception. The other 6 drives, there was a field goal and a touchdown, 3 punts and 2 safeties. I don't know, and I, like I said, scan Twitter really quick. If one of you out there has the stat, let me know. When was the last time in NFL history that one team suffered 2 safeties in the first half? And the first one, holding call on the offensive line in the end zone. That's an automatic safety. Second one, tried running it up the middle to Zach Charbonnet, I believe. He was stopped short of breaking the plane of the goal line. Another safety. And so, you know, in the stadium, it was a whole lot of looking at each other and, oh no, here we go again. The constant annual struggles on the offensive line year after year after year after year. And we've talked about it a lot here on the channel over the last 6 months, over the offseason, about what needed to be done up front. Did they do enough? They certainly, I would make the argument that they put more effort and resources into making changes up front this year than maybe any offseason that we've seen in a very, very long time. Obviously, you hire a new coaching staff, Scott Huff being part of that, the offensive line coach who came up from UW, very, very highly respected. And then as we start the game today, only one starter took the field that started a year ago. That was Charles Cross, and he got hurt in the first game. Charles Cross at left tackle, Laken Tomlinson signed as a free agent at left guard. Connor Williams was out there starting just 4 weeks after being signed by the Seahawks, just 8 months after tearing his ACL, playing for the Dolphins last December, starting at center. And then Anthony Bradford ends up winning that job. Mike McDonald kind of left that up in the air, wanted it to be mysterious. Maybe it would be third-round draft pick Christian Haynes. And then George Fant, returning to Seattle this year as a free agent on a 2-year deal, who had carved out a very respectable, solid career as a now kind of journeyman swing tackle that's going to give you a very solid performance. Early on, all sorts of struggles. Could not run the football. Could not protect Geno Smith at all. It wasn't even, although I'm sure there were people out there who were saying this, but you couldn't even begin to blame it on Geno not getting rid of the ball quick enough, or just holding onto the ball too long, or dancing around in the pocket. There was no pocket. It was instant. It only took 2 sacks on the day, but both those sacks were of the just on one of them, Laken Tomlinson just absolutely got beat one-on-one, completely abused. Anthony Bradford, a couple of penalties, got beat a couple of times. And look, I even tweeted, who's going to get benched first for Christian Haynes, Laken Tomlinson or Anthony Bradford? And I still stand by the fact, I think Christian Haynes, talent-wise, is better than both of them. At some point, his talent is going to force the team to play him ahead of one of those guys. They both struggled mightily in the first half. What we saw after that, though, I think can only be taken as a good sign, and I think tells us a little bit, this is the first time that we've had to see these coaches work together and deal with these stressors and deal with these issues and have to problem solve. And certainly they're going to do it in a different way than the previous staff. What we're hearing after the game, the approach at halftime was calm down. Everybody calm down. Geno talked to the team, said, everybody relax. And Ryan Grubb and his demeanor, a couple of the players pointed that out. His demeanor was, look, we're okay. Calm down, right? This is a close game. It's an ugly game, and it's a close game. Let's get back to basics. And they came out in the second half, and they ran the football. First 3 drives of the second half, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, essentially put the game away. The Broncos came back, made it a 1-score game late. But what kept it all together in the meantime was the defense. And so as I go through here and just kind of point out a couple of things I thought were good, and then we'll do some game balls. I mean, this is the headline, right? This is the storyline. This is the theme of the game. This is the biggest takeaway from this game after 3 years, and especially the last 2, of having one of the most ineffective defenses in the entire league. The Seahawks defense kept them in this game when everything was going wrong for the offense. And we're talking about second play of the game, interception deep in their own territory. We're talking about D. Williams muffing a punt, giving the Broncos the ball deep in their territory, 2 safeties. I mean, you couldn't script a worse beginning for this offense after expectations that were built up to be sky high, from yours truly included. I made the point with Amir Farrell of Predominantly Orange in the preview show that, look, it's kind of like it happens in every sport, really. everybody is undefeated. Everyone's feeling good. All fan bases are feeling good. They drink all the Kool-Aid, and you have 8 months to analyze every move and talk yourself into every draft pick being the perfect draft pick and every signing being the perfect signing. And you take in everything the coaches and players are saying. And what did we see in the preseason? In very, very limited fashion, obviously. This preseason, we saw whenever the ones were out there on the defense, they dominated. And then the one drive that we got to see the first team offense in the third preseason game against the Browns, 6 plays, touchdown. Geno Smith looked unstoppable. That's all we had to go by. And so it was pretty easy. I felt it when I woke up this morning at 6 o'clock, way earlier than I expected to. But then you realize it's game day and you get excited and you can't go back to bed. The expectations get a little unrealistic as you look around the league today. All the rookie quarterbacks that have been so ballyhooed and all looked good in the preseason, all struggled to some extent today. Some teams that had really high expectations placed on them struggled today. Some favorites lost. Week 1 is on NFL Network in the pregame show this morning. They were calling it the week of liars. It was Kyle Brandt talking about the week of liars. Like teams will lie to you week 1. They will make you think they are really good and they're not. Like Dallas Cowboys dominated today. Are they really that good? Are the Cleveland Browns really that bad? Most likely there will be some regression to the mean for the teams that played poorly week 1, the teams that played well. And so expectations are sky high. We had reason to believe the defense would be competent week 1. Even though I've been cautioning and people have been cautioning me, and we've had experts on the show that have said, wait, even Greg Bell last week, Tacoma News Tribune, longtime beat writer for the Seahawks, said, I think this team's going to push for the Seahawks for the playoffs. I think it's a good roster. It's a good team, but it's not going to be the team. It's not going to be as good a team in September as it is in November. So for the defense to come out and did what they did today, I think exceeded expectations. But I think we all had much higher expectations for the offense, even knowing that it was a bunch of parts being thrown together at the last minute, 5 guys that hadn't repped together very often. And then George Fant goes out on, I think, the second drive of the game with a knee injury, doesn't come back. So Stone Forsythe has to come in and play right tackle. So another combination of guys that hasn't played together. And offensive lines, more than any other unit, I think, on the field, require continuity. And so that was a struggle. And then early on top of that, it was surprising to me to see, and I even tweeted some frustration at the play calling, how aggressive Ryan Grubb was trying to be. That I thought the adjustment to start running the football came a little too late. It's hard to say too late because they won the game, but it came later than it should have, in my opinion. And they didn't have many opportunities. I think at halftime, I think the Broncos had run about twice as many plays as the Seahawks did. We'll get into some of the stats here in a minute. What kept them close was the defense and the legs of Geno Smith. His 34-yard rushing touchdown was a thing of beauty and reminiscent of John Mateer last night. Maybe he watched some of that game. If you watched WSU and Washington State Cougars beat Texas Tech last night, John Mateer, their quarterback, running for almost 200 yards. So that was fun to watch. Just checking the box score, it's as rough of a start as it appeared to be for Geno Smith. He ends up completing 72% of his passes, 18 out of 25, 171 yards, the 1 interception, and then a touchdown later on, little wheel route to Zach Charbonnet. A beautiful play. Only took the 2 sacks. Target share in this game was interesting after not seeing Tyler Lockett the entire preseason. We knew it would be a challenge for DK Metcalf today going up against the newly extended and very, very rich Patrick Surtain II. We knew he would be shadowing DK Metcalf, and in fact, he did on all but 1 snap. He was matched up against DK. So DK with only 3 catches in the game on 4 targets, although one of them was a key first down catch late in the game. But target share, Tyler Lockett was 7, led the team. and had the one-handed catch against Riley Moss on the last drive to get the first down to ice the game. So just when you think Tyler Lockett, too old, too banged up, can't stay healthy, too many business decisions, right? Big cap hit. This got to be his last year. Who was the go-to guy? And again, we would have expected that now, especially with Riley Moss, second-year player out of Iowa, starting his first game opposite Surtain at the other cornerback position. JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, only 2 targets in this game. So that's obviously something that we'll have to follow moving forward. And I thought that was something that throughout the game, I was a little frustrated by as well. It'd be interesting to see the heat charts to see where passes were intended, but it looked a whole lot to me in the stadium. There was a lot of passes to the flat and a lot of outs, not a lot of digs, not a lot of middle of the field stuff as a rule. And I thought, it felt very familiar in that sense of how frustrated we were last year with Shane Waldron not figuring out how to use JSN down the field, especially in the middle of the field. So that's the good one. The defense. Let's talk about the defense. So, and then we found out something interesting right before I went live here on Twitter that I'll get to in a second. But as a whole, they were very consistent all throughout the game. It felt from very early on like Bo Nix could not do a lot of damage. Not just because the Seahawks defense came to play, and they came to play in a number of ways. They looked remarkably more disciplined than the last couple of years. They were sure tacklers. And in fact, I think it was Terrell Dodson said after the game, he talked about how much work they do in practice on tackling angles. And you could see it. There were some open field tackles in this game that were absolutely huge. The Seahawks had 7 3-and-outs in this game. 7 3-and-outs. That's remarkable. And I think there was another drive that should have been a 3-and-out, but there was a penalty on third down. And while they only had 2 sacks, and one of them was of the Bo Nix scramble variety, Derek Hall getting his first NFL sack, kudos to him, we didn't see the kind of incessant, disruptive pressure that Mike Macdonald built his defenses on at Michigan and in Baltimore and built a reputation on. What we saw, I thought, was very sound execution. Whenever a Denver Bronco caught the football, there were multiple players around him to make the tackle. I thought at first glance, watching it live, the inside linebackers, Terrell Dodson and Jerome Baker, played well. They were always around the ball. We didn't see any broken plays, any huge explosives, any, oh my gosh, what the hell was that plays? And that is very, very different than what we saw the last couple of years. And very, very encouraging. We saw, and in fact, it could have been even better in this. We saw 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. A key interception by Julian Love down near the goal line to stop a drive. A great interception late in the game that was very impactful from Reek Wolin that all the players and coaches were raving about after the game, where he came all the way from the other side of the field and undercut the route. In fact, I think Coach McDonald said Reek Wolin's the only guy on the planet that could make that interception. So at least in the first game, any of the concerns that some of us had about his down sophomore year, he looked great. But even on top of all that, Terrell Dodson had a ball right. It hit him. He wears number 0, hit him right in the middle of the 0, and he dropped it over the middle of the field. And Devin Witherspoon had another ball that should have been a pick that he dropped. Seahawks got their hands on a couple other balls, but there wasn't the incessant pressure. However, after the game, I believe it was Witherspoon who said, we didn't open up the playbook at all this first week. The things that Mike Macdonald can do in his defense, we didn't show hardly any of that to the Broncos. Just wait and see. There's more to come. And that makes sense, actually, especially given comments from Macdonald a week or two ago maybe it was Greg Bell that related this on the show, that the playbook still wasn't fully installed. But what else have we heard about McDonald and his staff all offseason? What do they do best? They teach. And there's a method that he uses where he's able to boil complex concepts down into minimal verbiage so that players can understand it. And he also makes sure that everybody on the defense, all 11 players, know what the other 10 are going to do and knows all of their responsibilities. And that's how he can run all that sim pressure package he's known for, where he'll have 6-7 guys lurking on the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's dropping into coverage and who's coming, because they all have to be able to know everybody's coverage responsibilities and rush responsibilities based on their keys. So I thought, and I even mentioned to my buddy during the game that like, it seems like they're kind of sticking to a pretty vanilla game plan on defense. Kind of look like what we saw in the preseason, like only rushing 4 most of the time and not sending. I don't think we saw a lot of Witherspoon rushing the quarterback. I don't think we saw, I recall seeing, Baker and Dodson kind of jump up to the line of scrimmage a couple of times and then back off into pressure, but they didn't really get sent that often. So it makes a lot more sense now to hear those comments after the game. What else was good? Second half adjustments. The decision by Ryan Grubb to come out in the second half and run the football. And again, I keep mentioning Greg, but Greg mentioned after the game that the beginning of the game, first half, Seahawks are primarily trying to run the ball up the middle. And if there was anything that was really clear about what we've already talked about with the offensive line and the pressure they gave up, it was that those interior guys struggled. You would assume the guards, but I think it would be understandable if Connor Williams had some bad reps as well. First time playing after the injury, first time playing with these guys, first full speed for him, wouldn't surprise me. Second half, they started to go a little bit wider and run outside a little bit more. But I also felt like we saw the best version of Ken Walker that we've seen in a while. Because, yeah, while there were a couple plays where you saw his cutback ability, he seemed more intent on running north-south and not spending as much time breaking things. His touchdown run was an absolute thing of beauty. Absolute thing of beauty where, you saw just about everything that you like about Ken Walker. You saw the quickness, lateral agility, the vision to get to the corner, decision-making, and then at the end, the dive to the end zone to finish it off. Walker ends up carrying the ball 20 times for 103 yards. The Seahawks rushed for 146 yards today. And that is significant because guess how many times in 2023 they rushed for that many yards? Exactly 1. Week 3 against Carolina last year in a win at home, they ran for 146 yards. Now, 30 of that was from Geno Smith, 34 on the touchdown run. But still, it looked like a competent, consistent, sustainable run game in the second half. And if the passing game is going to take a little while to come together because of that offensive line, running the football is a good way to go, right? Now, have to talk about this. Well, let's do this. A couple of the bad things. We already talked about offensive line play. I don't want to beat that to death. Now, George Fant left the game early. It was ruled out immediately, which would indicate a serious injury. But after the game, Mike McDonald said, not sure. Not sure what it is. George Fant said, not sure. We're going to have it looked at. Now, if that makes you shudder, sounds a little familiar, right? Sounds a little Abe Lucas-ish. But I'll say this. For as much of a beating as some fans gave Stone Forsythe in the preseason, again, so much good information. If you didn't watch the interview I did with Greg Bell a week and a half ago, go check it out again because I keep going back to it. He said Stone Forsythe had his best training camp that he's had in his 4 years here. And then he looked better at right tackle instead of left tackle, where he was more of a natural left tackle coming out of Florida. Offensive line got better in the second half when he was in there. And so maybe it's not a terrible thing. Now, the one thing that did make us nervous is if anything had happened at that point to Cross or Forsyth, there were no other tackles on the active roster. Mike Jarrell was inactive for this game, as was Satawa Lamea, who played right tackle the last 2 years at Utah. And even though the Seahawks are playing him at guard, I wonder if he would be an emergency option there if he was active in a situation like this. So, if Fant's going to have to go on IR for any length of time, we might see Mike Jarrell sooner rather than later. And then one other bad thing I have to point out is D. Williams. And this is something that, for those of you who watch the show for me, for over the last 4 or 5 years, you heard me complain about Nick Bellore being on the roster. And I get it. He was a leader in the locker room. He was a special teams ace, but he was listed as a fullback, took up a roster spot, never played that position, never played linebacker, even though he played some there in the preseason. His only role on the team was special teams. And I used to argue, and his last couple of years, he made significant money. I used to argue, is that worth taking up a valuable roster spot? You can't find somebody else that can be as good as him on special teams and also be able to contribute at another position if needed. Well, D. Williams is that guy this year, in a sense. Seahawks paid him their highest bonus of the undrafted free agents this year. They targeted him as a guy with these new kickoff rules that they wanted to be a return specialist. And the way they kind of managed him all preseason, the fact that he made the 53-man roster in place of somebody like DJ James, who was a 6th-round draft pick, it tells you that was kind of the plan all along, that they were dead set on having D. Williams on this roster. He muffed a punt today, led to a turnover, led to a field goal by the Broncos, could have been worse, and had another one where he called for a fair catch, let the ball bounce behind him inside the 5, and the Broncos down it at the 1, led to a safety. If you're going to be on the roster to do one thing, you damn well better do it well. Or I would rather have an extra linebacker, an extra edge rusher, an extra corner, right? So that one is worth watching. Sure. Rookie, undrafted guy, first game, fine. The other interesting thing that we're going to have to see how it goes league-wide this week, and then as the season progresses, is it seemed to me like in the second half, both teams just started kicking the ball in the end zone, that they didn't want to risk a return. Which, again, this is going to be something worth tracking. And I know there was one suggestion in the preseason already that if teams just start doing that, just start kicking the ball out of the end zone thinking, hey, we'll give it to them on the 35. We're not going to risk a return. That maybe the league would consider changing it to the 40 as a penalty for that, to try and encourage more returns. Now, there was one return for a touchdown today in the NFL with the new rule. And of course, it was DJ Dallas, former Seahawk, now Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals going on the road and upsetting the Buffalo Bills to start their season 1-0. So thought that was interesting. Let's give our game balls out, and then we'll get to some of your questions and comments. We've got a whole bunch of them that I can't wait to get to. And then good second half adjustments. Talked about this. Talked about the running game. Game ball. Offense, Ken Walker. Has to be. I thought he looked physical. Now, he did come up late in the game. He left on the second to last drive, I think. Said he had some abdominal pain, but said he'll be fine. It did look like there was a play where he kind of went down at the end of it, and maybe he pulled something. But let's hope that he doesn't wake up tomorrow feeling it, because sometimes if we're talking oblique, like sometimes those can be lingering injuries. And Walker certainly looked dynamic today. As did Zach Charbonnet, only 8 carries for 12 yards, but he had the 30-yard touchdown catch. And it wasn't until late that the Seahawks caught up on number of plays. We'll go over those team stats in a minute. But yeah, thought he was really impressive. And then on defense, it was Julian Love. He was everywhere. Had the interception to thwart a drive, had some big hits, had some pass breakups. Let's see what his numbers were. Yeah, led the team with, this is what it felt like in the stadium. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you think a guy is having a more dynamic game, and then you go look at the numbers and you go, oh, he had 3 tackles. Julian Love, 12 total tackles, 10 solo, 1 tackle for loss. And then he had the interception and a couple of pass breakups as well. Really, really impressive game. He looked like the leader of that defense, flying around, always in the right place. There was some question among fans when he got the big extension earlier this offseason. My first reaction was, well, let's give the benefit of the doubt. Mike McDonald has a great history with safeties. And so you would think he would have an eye for safeties. And if he thinks Julian Love is worth committing that kind of money to, then I'm going to trust him until there's a reason not to. Well, game 1, right out of the gate, Julian Love looked great. I thought Rashawn Jenkins looked great. Kayvon Wallace looked great, flying around. All the DBs, the secondary looked phenomenal. Really impressive. Now, none of the guys up front really made a lot of plays that stood out, but I think that was kind of by design, especially when you listen to those comments from Spoon after the game that they didn't show their hand. I think those guys up front were just taking on blockers, gap integrity, fill in their gaps so the other guys could come up and make plays. Found it interesting. Let's see. Did Byron Murphy get credited with any? He got 2 tackles, 1 solo, 2 total. But you look at some of the other guys. Leonard Williams, 2 tackles. Jonathan Hankins, 2 tackles. Where's Jaron Reed? Jaron Reed, 0 tackles. But they were doing their job and freeing up the others. Terrell Dodson, 10 tackles in his Seahawks debut. Jerome Baker, 5 tackles, 1 for loss. Rashawn Jenkins, 6 tackles. Devin Witherspoon, 7. Boye Mafe, 4. Trey Brown, 3. Marquise Blair even got some snaps today. He was elevated to the practice squad yesterday, got 2 tackles in his return to Seattle. Really, really cool to see what those guys were doing up front. But here's the thing about Byron Murphy. When I looked in my binoculars to watch what was going on up front, I saw Murphy being double teamed, you guys. His first game in the NFL as a rookie, and the book on him already, like I saw him getting doubled, which obviously is only going to clear things for other teams. I was mistaken. Arizona had lost today, 34-28. It was back and forth. Saw them take the lead in the stadium on one of the screens, and then not to deflect blame, but one of my buddies that I was with said Arizona won. I thought they won, so their own one to start the season. But that offense going into Buffalo, scoring 28 points, they looked pretty good, even though Marvin Harrison only had 1 catch for 4 yards. And as a guy who has him in 2 of my fantasy leagues, not great. Speaking of fantasy football from that angle, I'd be really hesitant to play any Seahawks offensive players for a little while. It looks like this offense is going to take a little while to come together. And we'll get back to that, though, in a minute. Let's do this. Let's get to your comments and questions, you guys. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. So some of these might be a little like this one. Carly Perkins, Lockett killed it. Shut up the people saying he's lost a step and closed out the game for us. He did. You have to see the highlight. And maybe I'll do a film breakdown later this week when I get the all-22, and maybe it'll be Lockett. Talk about some route concepts, but also a couple of the catches that he had. And the one to ice it against Riley Moss, like one of the toughest catches you can make. If anyone has ever played football, played receiver at any level, and had to do tip drills where they basically either sometimes actually physically touch the ball. They have somebody, someone's throwing you the football and then someone stands in front of you and either gets a hand on it or puts a hand in front and pulls it away at the last second just to get you to focus on the ball and not pay attention. Like Riley Moss swiped at the ball, and how it got through there, I don't know. And then Lockett essentially caught it with one hand, caught it with his outside hand, corralled it to his breadbasket. And that was the final first down. Denver didn't have any timeouts left. They were able to go victory formation after that. Let's go. Defense looked solid. A lot of Bronco fans in the house. I did see that, and that was a little disappointing. I would have thought first game out of the gate, lots of preseason excitement for the team, some of the sentiment that like it was time for Carroll to go. It was time for a change. And yet so many people sold their tickets. And I just wonder how much of that is uncertainty. I'll wait until, I'll believe it when I see it. Or maybe it was people disillusioned because it's not Pete Carroll anymore, not as interested. I don't know. There was a lot of orange, but they weren't making a lot of noise after the first quarter. Here's one that I want to address because Rudy says, got to criticize the play calling in the first half as well. I did. And I think this is something, hopefully we won't have to talk about this for very long, but it's something we had to talk about almost every week when Shane Waldron was here. And that is that great play callers can scheme to hide your weaknesses to some extent, not always. And so I thought the plan, first of all, to come out and go 7-step drop, long developing plays. I can't wait to see the all 22, or even I'll watch when we're done here. I'll watch the full broadcast replay. And often things look different, but it looked like, we're going to come out and be aggressive, try to throw the football down the field. I thought that was a questionable game plan given how little this offensive line had played together. And then again, I thought as the first half went on, there was a lack of adjustment away from that. Let's get the ball out in the flat, get the ball to the running backs. Let's try to stick a little bit more with the running game. Let's try to get the ball over the middle of the field, use the tight ends. Let's go 12 personnel, 12 or 13 personnel. Keep those tight ends in. Give some help. Right? Didn't see that. And that was the kind of sort of arrogant stubbornness that we've seen over the years from a number of past coordinators under Carroll, where they just wouldn't adjust. They wouldn't go back to something that was working. I remember last year a couple of times talking about Shane Waldron having a lot of success with 12 and 13 personnel, and then the next game coming out and going and just leaving his tackles on an island, even though Charles Cross and Abe Lucas were on the injured list. But what I saw in the second half was encouraging. And look, it is a whole new ball game for Ryan Grubb. He hasn't coached in the NFL before. It's going to take a little bit of time. And he's playing against a pretty good team. Pretty good. There's some guys on defense there that can cause some problems. Pretty solid defensive line. And then you got Patrick Surtain back there locking things up on the back end. Obviously, we'll monitor that going forward. But certainly, the microscope is going to be on Ryan Grubb, his first time in the NFL as a play caller. Let's see. And then, but here's the other side of that argument. And I got some blowback on Twitter when I criticized Grubb. Felt like it was more on the O-line in the first half. I had some people come at me and say, hey, you can't coach around bad players, something like that. Well, yeah, you kind of can. And we saw that in the second half. Great tackling today. Very, very true. Going to keep heaping praise on Connor Williams. Can't wait to see the tape, see how well he played. True Metal Jake said, no, it was just a really bad throw. Yeah, thought he came back and looked good after that, though. Had some nice throws. Who else we got here? A little shout out to Tasha. One of the things I wanted to see is how they made adjustments in the second half. They did. Now this is something I wanted to address. Krishna, what did you think of the defense? How much of it was a product of Bo Nix being terrible? He wasn't terrible. He wasn't terrible at all. I just thought they handcuffed him. And I think, and this is where, look, we all want everything to be perfect. We all would have hoped that we'd be walking away from this game and it would be a blowout win, and we would have seen the Seahawks dominate in all phases of the game. I think Sean Payton did us some favors with a very, very predictable and vanilla game plan from the very outset. It seemed like they weren't going to let Bo Nix take shots down the field. he hit a couple of shots late in the game when they were down by 2 scores, and it was a little bit desperation. But it was a lot of designed rollouts from the very beginning. He anticipated that McDonald was going to bring a lot of pressure and that was going to be a problem for them. So a lot of designed rollouts, a lot of short passes. Nix, I mean, here it is. Nix threw the ball 42 times, completed 26 for 138 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Ran the ball 5 times for 35 yards, a long of 23, and that happened on their last drive. And that's kind of the point I'm getting to. I think Bo Nix could have been a whole lot more of a problem. But they didn't design anything for him to use his feet, which he's very, very good at. Maybe some of that was just wanting to protect him. But I didn't think he was terrible. I think he had handcuffs on. But I think maybe today, with it being our first time with a new coaching staff and a bunch of new players, we'll take it. Maybe the Broncos did us a little bit of a favor there. By the way, shout out to Austin, who met at the game as I was getting into my seats with Steven of Stephen Douglas and Company, the bumper music I play at the end of the show. My good friend came down and introduced himself. Austin said, "Hey, I just saw you walking into your seats." Apparently he sits about 4 or 5 rows behind me, has season tickets as well, says, "Big fan of the show, watch it all the time. Nice to meet you." So really, really cool of Austin to come down and say hello. If any of you see me at the game, please don't hesitate to do the same thing. Hope we get a better Seahawks to opposition ratio from Lumen Field. So many Bronco fans. While I thought it was a lot, I'm not so sure it's any different than any other week, but it's a little easier to spot when they wear the orange jerseys, right? Like I've seen games in the stadium with the New York Giants, for example, and if they're all wearing white or navy blue jerseys, you're not going to notice them sitting up in your seats. They're not going to stand out as much. So I don't know. Thought that was interesting. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, should have had 5 interceptions. 3 were dropped. Jack Stevens says Stone Feet Forsyth cannot be a regular starter for this offense to be successful. He may have to be. But this brings up a good point. I said earlier that at some point, I think Christian Haynes is talented enough. I think he's more talented than Laken Tomlinson and Anthony Bradford. At some point, some combination of him showing the team he's ready and one or both of those guys struggling, and I think Haynes is going to be starting. I don't think it's going to take long. I would be surprised if we don't see Christian Haynes in the starting lineup by week 4 or 5. The bye at the latest. Now, if George Fant's going to have to go on IR and be out for any length of time, Mike Jarrell is going to get an opportunity at some point. You would think, unless Stone Forsyth stays healthy and plays well. We have seen him put good reps on tape. He's not a disaster over there, but he's probably going to have to be the right tackle for at least a while now as we head forward. And it'll be interesting to see if I would also imagine that if Fant has to go on the injured list, well, I was going to say maybe they'll bring someone else in, but they very well would likely, because remember, they brought McClendon Curtis back on the practice squad and had him playing almost exclusively at right tackle during training camp when George Fant was banged up and they were protecting him. And so Curtis was getting a lot of run as the first right tackle after being the first right guard throughout OTAs when Bradford was hurt. So I wouldn't want to see that. I would look, you think Forsyth is bad? If you had to see McClendon Curtis, in my opinion, be the starter at right tackle, would be a disaster. I think his footwork and pass protection is the worst thing we've seen in a Seahawks uniform since Jermaine Ifedi. I don't want to see that. So, yeah, we'll see. And again, this is a test, not just for Ryan Grubb, but Scott Huff. Like, it's his first time in the NFL too. Like, this was his first time going up against an NFL defense. They're going to evaluate, and they're going to make decisions. I will say this, and one thing that I expect to be different this year is I think Pete Carroll and his staff in the past had kind of legacied players in, kind of given them a scholarship, granted them their position. And despite all his talk about always compete, he didn't always compete. And he allowed certain players to keep their jobs when the performance didn't really dictate it, in my opinion. I don't think this staff is going to have as long a leash if they have a viable alternative. I know they love Mike Jarrell. They didn't keep him on the roster just because they needed a warm body. They think he has the upside to be a starting right tackle in this league. And he may get that opportunity this year. Too early to talk about trades for O-line improvement? Yeah. No one's trading anyone right now. There's no one in a contract holdout out there. There's nobody who's, no. I would rather, look, if Stone Forsythe gets hurt or if he plays terribly, give Mike Jarrell a shot. I saw enough. I know against 2s and 3s, but I saw some real upside from him. He's a much better athlete than Forsythe or Fant. And oh, by the way, do not forget that John Schneider said just last week that he expects two things. He expects Abe Lucas to be fully healthy at some point this year, and that he will play. And we will see him at right tackle this season. And so, he's on the PUP list. He has to miss at least 4 games. We'll see what happens after that, how quickly he can be ready. But this may be a situation where we just need Stone Forsythe to be serviceable until that happens. Tackling much improved. Can't agree more. Here's another one. Tackling and lack of yards after catch was inspiring. There just weren't any broken plays. Although Norm thinks the tackling can get better. It's funny how people see things differently, right? Okay. This is something I want to address. This is great. Ricky Ricardo, can we please address the negligence of the GM with this O-line? How can John think rolling with this group would be okay? Like I've been saying all offseason, if this line is still bad, fire John. I try to keep things positive on the show. This is a ridiculous take. Absolutely ridiculous take. You look at what the Seahawks have committed in assets this offseason to the offensive line, right? Charles Cross is a given. They bring in Laken Tomlinson, a guy who just 3 years ago was an all-pro, coming off a couple of uneven years in New York, but with a disaster of an offense. No quarterback, terrible offensive coordinator, all sorts of dysfunction on offense there, okay? So maybe he's spent, maybe he's done, whatever. They feel like he has a lot, he still has something to play for. And then at center, you paid solid money to sign an all-pro level center in his prime. You get a discount, and he's only available because he's coming off injury. But he played the whole game today. He's 100% healthy. 27 years old in his prime. Connor Williams is a top 5 center in this league. And they targeted him from the spring. Did the work, got in with his agent, continued to stay in touch, recruited him, made their case, brought him in, signed him. That's not negligence. They would have just stuck with Oluwatimi. Then you look at the last couple of years. Last year, they spend a 4th and a 5th on their interior offensive line. One of those guys, Bradford, is starting now. The other one, Oluwatimi, they didn't think was good enough, so they went out and signed Connor Williams. That's not negligence. That's being proactive. They draft Christian Haynes in the 3rd round this year, a guy that should never have been there at 81. Will be a long-term starting guard for them sooner rather than later. They spend a 6th round pick on Mike Jarrell and a 5th round pick, or 2 6, right? Satawa Lamea and Mike Jarrell. They protect them on the roster so they don't lose them through waivers because they see the upside. Something they wouldn't have done in the past. They would have stayed with the journeyman. They would have stayed with the Evan Browns of the world. They would have kept McClendon Curtis and Raekwon O'Neal. They are committing to more talent up front. They are committing to more long-term talent. I'm arguing that even if we never see Abe Lucas come back at 100%, that by this time a year from now, we could very well be talking about Charles Cross, Satawa Lamea, Connor Williams, Christian Haynes, Mike Jarrell being your starting offensive line and having tons of athletic upside and being a unit that can now get some continuity and be together for 3-4 years and start to build something. That's not negligence. Get out of here with that. Okay. Sorry. Want to get fired up. It's going to take a while. Nothing takes longer to put together than an offensive line when you're putting new pieces together. But would you have preferred they just rolled out the same unit as last year and just brought back Evan Brown at center and Damian Lewis at left guard? Most of you told me all last year that Damian Lewis was overrated and that they shouldn't try to sign him. And they would have had to step up and match what Carolina signed him for. And that would have cost us, maybe it would have cost us a Jonathan Hankins. Maybe it would have cost us Connor Williams. We wouldn't have had the money to sign Connor Williams later if we had brought back Damian Lewis. Let's see. The run wall. The run wall was huge. Yeah, if Laken Tomlinson plays that bad again, they should just start Haynes and let him develop. He can't be any worse. He wouldn't be. I think once you make that move, sometimes it's kind of hard to put that genie back in the bottle. I think, a guy like Laken Tomlinson would be the consummate professional. And if he got benched and then he had to come in and play later, he'd play the best he could. Maybe a younger guy like Anthony Bradford would struggle a little bit more like that. But they probably feel like I said earlier, at some point, Christian Haynes is going to be a long-term starter. Which side's it going to be on? He's played right guard his whole life. He's only played left guard in the last month. He played it well, though. He put some really good reps on tape playing in Tomlinson's spot in the preseason. So once you make that move, you don't want to flip him back and forth. You're going to want to make that decision. They're not going to make it knee-jerk based on one game. Okay? This is a long process. As much as we all wanted everything to be perfect, and we wanted Mike Macdonald to be the second coming, and we wanted to dominate right out of the gate and go 15-2 and get the number 1 seed and go to the Super Bowl in his first year, the fact that this is a new staff and a bunch of young players, one of the youngest rosters in the league, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. So, they got the win today. Right? K9's the best running back in the league. You look around the league today, I don't think there were a lot of dynamic rushing performances. Jonathan Taylor only had 46 yards, I think. James Conner had a big game. Let's go back here now, and I want to look at some of the team stats. Because again, a lot of them ended up being a lot more even at the end of the game, and the Seahawks even pulled ahead in a couple areas because at halftime, it was basically the Broncos had like a 2-1 lead in just about every key category. The Seahawks end up with 19 first downs to the Broncos 13. They hold the Broncos to 5 out of 18 on third down. That was a huge problem last year. Remember, they gave up more than 50% third downs last year. That was huge. Now the flip side of that, Seahawks only converted 4 out of 12 themselves. So that obviously needs to get better. Total plays, they came back and Denver had 69 to Seattle's 60. But that was one where at one point it was like 41-20. And remember, the Seahawks ran the fewest number of plays in the league last year. One of the reasons their offense wasn't more productive. But they end up winning the yardage battle, 304-231. They had the exact same amount of drives. Yards per play, 5.1. Denver was held to 3.3. And then rushing held the Broncos to 4 yards of rush, 99 on the game. And the Seahawks with just 6 penalties for 41 yards. That's, a couple of them came at key moments. Obviously, the holding call in the end zone resulted in a safety. You can't do that. But, compared to some Pete Carroll teams over the last few years and a couple of the preseason games where it was a concern for Mike Macdonald, thought that was a pretty clean game right out of the gate. And then time of possession, they didn't quite get back to it being even because this was really out of balance, even deep into the third quarter, but they end up almost even. Denver with 31, just over 31 minutes of possession. Seahawks just under 29. And I think those are the key stats. I don't think we missed anything there. I thought the Metcalf-Surtain battle was interesting, as it always would be, right? Last year, Metcalf caught 2 years ago in the opener, the Russell Wilson game. Metcalf caught 7 balls, but for only 36 yards. 4 targets. He had, 4 targets, 3 catches, 29 yards, although one of those was for a first down. Surtain's good, man. He might be the best cover corner in the NFL right now. Like, he reminds me of peak Jalen Ramsey. The thing that I do like, and there's 2 sides of this coin, I didn't think they shied away from him early. We've seen games in the past with the Seahawks facing some number 1 corners where they just didn't throw their direction at all. Didn't do that. In fact, at one point, I turned to Steve and I said, hey, they should probably pick on Riley Moss a little bit more. Like, first start in the NFL, second year in the league, Surtain on the other side. Like, come on. Let's not get too cocky and try to go after Surtain too hard. But Moss acquitted himself well in a lot of ways. 12 tackles, 8 solo, 1 tackle for loss in that game. So let's do this real quick. Where are... because again, I go to the game, right? I follow things as closely as I can, and then I come back. But a quick look around the rest of the division. The Lions hosting the Rams right now. The Lions leading 10-3 in that one. As I said, the Cardinals lose to the Bills 34-28. They start 0-1. The Patriots, I said there were some upsets, right? The New England Patriots, new head coach, probably the least talented roster overall in the NFL last year from top to bottom. Jacoby Brissett playing quarterback for them. They go into Cincinnati with Jamar Chase on the field, Joe Burrow healthy, everybody there, and they beat the Bengals 16-10. So the Patriots now come home for their home opener to face the Seahawks next week, flying high, feeling good about themselves. So a lot of work to be done over the next week for the Seahawks to just tighten up some of those things. Hopefully in the second half, they found some things. And then again, I keep coming back to that comment from Spoon that, hey, we really didn't show much. We kind of kept things vanilla today. Let's just check and see real quick if we got some. I got some Lions updates here. Rudy says we threw to DK too few times. Should have challenged him more. Okay, Joe Mixon had 160 yards rushing for Houston today. Saquon had the 3 touchdown game. Yeah, I should have remembered that. He's on one of my main fantasy teams. All right, so here's what we're going to do. So tomorrow, I am assuming, and first of all, let me check this real quick. Again, the updates, injury updates, they don't know what's wrong with Fant. And so we'll find out. Puka Nacua out for the Rams with that knee injury that he nursed all preseason. That's not good for them. But I just wanted to see also their starting center, Steve Avila, out. Man, they were banged up all preseason too, along that offensive line after putting a bunch of resources into that. Yeah, so what's ahead? Tomorrow, I'll be looking forward to Mike McDonald's coaches show. Again, I haven't got confirmation of this. If any of you have seen it, let me know. I'm assuming that he'll do a Monday coaches show, just like Pete Carroll always would do. And then he's had a chance to watch the film and he can really break some things down. I'll have had a chance to rewatch the game again. And so once I get the all 22, we'll do some deep dives there. And then we'll start looking ahead to that matchup with the New England Patriots. Again, let me see here. Yeah. Cincinnati, Felipe Nomad says, since he always plays that crap the first couple of weeks, they always do tend to, don't they? And then they get rolling. But yeah, let's do this. That's my buddy Steve. What's the game with me today? Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, and let me know what you think down in the comments. What were some of your biggest takeaways? Who would you give game balls to? Anything we didn't talk about here today that I didn't mention that concerns you or that you think needs some props? Trey Brown made a couple of plays today too. You know, I'm so excited. If there's one takeaway that I'll leave you with, it is this. I think I even underestimated, and we'll find out how good Bo Nix and this Broncos offense is, but we're talking about Sean Payton, one of the great offensive minds that this league has seen in the last 20 years, right? As bad as the Seahawks defense has been the last couple of years, it didn't matter who we were playing, right? So if you try to tell me, it's just Bo Nix in his first start, it's just the Broncos. Look how many bad quarterbacks moved the ball against the Seahawks the last couple of years. PJ Walker looked like a competent starting quarterback for the Browns last year, moving the ball up and down the field against the Seahawks. You know, they played some rookie quarterbacks. They played some backup quarterbacks. You know, we've with the Colt McCoy game a couple years ago for the Giants, that was huge at the end of the year, a game that they needed to win. They just couldn't. It didn't matter. That defense was inept at times. This defense controlled the football game, gave the offense a chance to come around and catch up. And then once they had a 2-score lead after what we had seen the first 3.5 quarters, a lot of people left. I stayed till the end, but a lot of people left. Like, that's how good they felt. Some of them might have just wanted to get out while they could still get an Uber before the rush. But I felt like, okay, they can't. I haven't seen anything to suggest they're going to come back and be able to pull this game out now. Like, we got it in the bag. And that's even without, we didn't get a lot of sacks, didn't get a lot of dynamic pressure on Bo Nix. I think that's the best thing we can take away from this game, is that a defense that we thought was going to take a while to come together played so well the first week out. 7-3 and outs. That is outstanding. Now they go to New England. They play a team there with, not a lot of weapons, feeling good about themselves coming off in Cincinnati game. But now week 2 tells more of the truth, right? They're going to get our tape. We're going to get their tape. We'll know a lot more. I mean, come on. We're going to know more about this team with each passing week, but we'll know a lot more about this team a week from now than we do today. Thanks for tuning in. A whole bunch of you in here. Thanks for all the comments and questions. If you came in late, this thing will reside on the YouTube page, and you can go back and watch it then. Otherwise, I will be back tomorrow. Until then, forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys.